Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton,
I'm Bob Scarborough.
and we are
The
FAIRtax Guys.
is,
Uh,
tried and true. The old scrolling banner for those of you on radio. You need to go to FairTax store and look for the little gadgets that are on there that help you make impressions about the FairTax. And the scrolling banner is one of the best ways to do that. It's got all the information right there, including the website, fairtax.org. Simple, efficient, visible. People are really starting to consider the fair tax, and I mean really starting to ask questions.
yeah, you,
Deep,
you had you had somebody there at the radio station a couple of days ago did just that, did you not?
yes, I did, and I got to tell you, it's a matter of just continually presenting the fair tax, presenting the concept, and everybody that's listening or watching the program can do that. And as we've always said, we say this every so often on the show. If you have an opportunity to get in front of five people every couple of days, and sometimes you're having a conversation with somebody here, and there's a party that's not even associated with your conversation that's picking up on what it is that you're saying, and they go, "Wow, this is man, I didn't know about." And so you never know a conversation you might be having in a public square that someone else might be hearing it that you were unaware of. So always talk about the fair tax. Always.
Well, I will do it to the best of my ability. I don't know what's going on for the past week and a half or so. I think it's allergies, but I have just been so congested in my throat and my head. All I mean, you should have heard me last week trying to broadcast our local baseball game here. Yeah, I mean no disrespect to him, but you know that all of the health issues that basketball analyst Dick Vitale has had has really affected his voice. So
Yeah.
I was through this whole doubleheader baseball game sounding like Dick Vitale. So
Yeah,
I will try to get through as best I can today.
we need to send you a case of cheer wine. I know
No,
you have
I
one right.
just happen to have one right
This
here. There we go.
for those of
I'll
you
use
on
most of this.
Bob Paxton has just opened a can of Cheerwine, North Carolina's finest elixir.
Absolutely. Well, let's get going here on Fairtax Power Radio. We have got some goodies in the Congress.gov segment. The Congress critters have really been busy for the past couple of weeks, and let's get right into it here.
Sure.
Beginning with HR 2900 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to increase and make fully refundable the child and dependent care tax credit, to increase the maximum amount excludable from gross income for employer-provided dependent care assistance and for other purposes. We've been banging on this for weeks here. It seems like Congress critters are going tax credit, tax credit, tax credit, tax credit, and that will continue this week here. But that's to make fully refundable the child and dependent care tax credit. Wait a minute, I need some more cheer wine here.
You do sound like Dick Vitale, just a
Oh,
little. So fairtax.org is the website
I'll,
you can get a lot of information about. But what we're talking about right now is congress.gov. And the Congress critters, as Bob Paxton so eloquently labeled them over the years, they stick a lot of stuff in the tax code that really doesn't need to be there. And the fair tax will disconnect all of that and make it irrelevant because of
indeed.
the tax code.
Well, I will never be as flashy as Dick Vitale, but we'll go on here. This one I think is going to land in the Hall of Shame, the tax proposal Hall of Shame for this year. This is HR 2875. You talk about a very, very narrowly targeted benefit, and this one does it to amend the Internal Revenue Code to allow refunds of federal motor fuel excise taxes on fuels used in mobile mammography vehicles. And that
Boy,
comes from,
that's it right down, isn't it?
yeah, that comes from your neck of the woods, Representative Tim Moore, North Carolina 14.
Oh boy, Tim.
But I mean, I think that's probably the narrowest little, credit or, cutout that I have seen in all of the times we do this. I mean, I've never seen a mobile mammography vehicle. I guess they exist. They have to, or they got the X-ray machine or whatever they use to do those things, and they go around to treat patients that have a hard time getting into the clinic itself. But
I wonder,
they want to refund the motor fuel excise tax if you put fuel in one of those kind of vehicles.
that's crazy.
Well,
Well,
I'm sure it,
the challenge is uh, do for one, do for all mentality. But in the tax code, really, and
yeah, well,
and the fair tax gets rid of of all that minute the categorization, the minute categorization of tax credits, incentives, and things like that. So,
yep, I tell you, but that one's going in the Hall of Shame just for being so incredibly narrow. Let's moving right along here. HR 2872 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to require adjusted financial statement income to be reduced by the amount of certain deductions relating to repair and maintenance of certain public utility property. Got that?
no.
I didn't think so. Well, let's just leave that one lying. Go on. HR 2871. Here we go to amend the Internal Revenue Code to restrict the advanced manufacturing production credit with respect to components produced by or in connection with foreign entities of concern.
Hmm.
You can't make that stuff up. One
I
more
mean,
here for we. All right, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say you can't. It's hard to believe and to understand that they're doing this without cracking a smile, and they're very serious about it. The folks that are putting these bills up there attached to the tax code, they're serious about doing it. They're not joking. But I
That
don't
they
see.
do. We got one more. This is HR 2867, and there's a companion bill in the Senate, S 1422. It says to amend the Internal Revenue Code to prohibit the use of foreign feedstocks for purposes of the clean fuel production credit and for other purposes. Now, I'm not sure I see the connection between foreign feedstocks and clean fuel, but there it is.
And yeah, other than you're using corn uh, somehow, using some agricultural product for to help subsidize their uh, the farmers and all.
Okay, well let's move on here. We'll get more into this next week on FairtaX Power Radio, but we are going to start I'll call this a multi-part series. I don't know how many episodes it's going to take us to get through all of this. At least two, possibly, excuse me, possibly three. But a listener pointed us to a video on YouTube entitled 10 Reasons the Fair Tax Fails Us. And when you're advocating for a position, it's always a good idea to keep track of what kind of arguments are being raised against you. And I looked at this video, and it has been up since February of 2023. When I first looked at it, it had 616 views, so it's not exactly setting the world on fire in terms of attracting eyeballs. But this video was put up by an outfit called Watch Guard Capital.
Mhm.
I checked this out a little bit. This is a registered investment advisor named Stephen Paluga. He's in Arizona, and I looked at his website. One of the services he offers, would you believe, tax planning. So what you're hearing in this video are the words of someone who benefits from the existing income tax system. This is not an unbiased, objective analysis of the fair tax. It's somebody whose business will be negatively impacted if the fair tax is enacted. And one thing we keep hitting on, you got to keep in mind, folks, that the fair tax replaces the income tax. So if you're going to make an objection about the fair tax, in order for that thing to be valid, you've really got to show not that the fair tax is imperfect, but that the fair tax is worse than the income tax in that regard. Because nobody in the fair tax movement says the fair tax is perfect. But we've got a lot of guys like this who have a vested interest in keeping the income tax. They are indeed comparing the fair tax to perfection, finding it wanting, and using that imperfection as a reason why people should oppose the fair tax. What they should be doing, of course, is comparing the fair tax to the income tax, where they will find the fair tax is vastly superior in spite of its imperfections. And this video, it's not awfully long as far as how long the length of the video is, but I will say it's long on opinion and woefully short on facts to support those opinions. So here we go. We're going to dig in. WatchGuard Capital's 10 reasons not to support the fair tax. Number one, you're not going to believe this. His very first reason for opposing the fair tax: we should be very careful about allowing politicians to alter the Constitution right now. That doesn't
don't alter the Constitution, states do.
Yeah, well, you saw that and said, really? Is that all you've got? I mean, you talk about grasping at straws to come up with a reason to oppose the fair tax. This is it. Now, normally, when you're advocating for a position, you'll come out of the box with your strongest points. And in just about every case, when somebody makes a totally irrational argument like this against the fair tax, you're dealing with one of two things. It's either honest ignorance, the guy just doesn't understand the fair tax, or
Right.
it's intentional dishonesty. The guy knows better. He's just not telling the truth because the truth doesn't fit his narrative. And of course, most of the time, I'll give people the benefit of the doubt and just assume that they don't really fully understand the fair tax when they make statements like that. Excuse me.
Right. And the thing about it is that somebody who is in the financial services business may have a need for things to stay like they are. I'm not saying
Yep.
I don't know who this person is. I don't know the company, WatchGuard Capital, but it does present a challenge when you're making claims like what we're hearing and what we'll be experiencing.
Yeah.
Because I've read this, and as we go over it over the next several episodes, we'll find out, and we'll have discussions about this. And for those of you watching or listening, yeah, I guess you could search for this 10 reasons not to support the fair tax by WatchGuard Capital.
Yeah, I'm sure you can search for it on YouTube and find it, but I've got a really hard time believing that this is honest ignorance. I mean, this is a financial advisor who ought to know better. But when I first heard that this was his first argument against the fair tax, I knew I was dealing with somebody who doesn't have a lot of ammunition in the arsenal. But again, my voice is kind of failing me. So if you would kindly, Kimo-san, let's just go through for the record what the constitutional amendment process is.
Well, politicians cannot alter the Constitution at will. The constitutional amendment process intentionally was designed to be difficult and to set a really high bar in order to ensure that politicians can't monkey with the Constitution at their discretion. A constitutional amendment has to originate in one of two ways. It must either be passed by Congress with a 2/3 majority in both the House and the Senate, or be proposed by an Article 5 Convention of States. The 2/3 majority provision means that any constitutional amendment coming out of Congress must have strong bipartisan support. Again, you can't monkey with the Constitution with just a simple majority. You have to have, consensus. And as tight as our representative government is right now in terms of political sides, you have to have support from both parties.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll go ahead. After that, an amendment must be ratified by 3/4 of the states. That's 38. Those 38 ratifications must be achieved within a 7-year window, or the amendment dies. The
Yes.
fair tax
So
will not change the Constitution.
no legislation can change the Constitution. The fair tax cannot and does not change the Constitution. It does not make repealing the 16th Amendment a prerequisite to the initial implementation of the fair tax. It merely says that if the 16th Amendment is not repealed through the normal amendment process, that the fair tax sunsets 7 years after enactment. But that is a guarantee written into the fair tax bill to ensure that we will never have an income tax on top of the fair tax. Since repealing the 16th Amendment renders an income tax unconstitutional, Supreme Court's already affirmed that. And so claiming that the fair tax amounts to letting politicians frivolously monkey with the Constitution, that is just beyond laughable. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that should pretty much
Yeah.
shoot any credibility he has all to pieces. But we will continue. We will let our Fair Tax Power Radio audience hear all 10 of these guys' points. And so if you may proceed, kind sir, with point number 2.
The 23% fair tax rate is temporary. It's only for the first year. After that, it will go up to cover the expanding Social Security and Medicare costs. The fair tax will make everything we buy more expensive.
Oh, we've heard that. We've heard that before, haven't we?
Well, I mean, it's like people use that, and it's kind of like a go away comment, don't bother me, and that kind of thing. This particular stand at least has some substance to it. The fellow is actually making 2 points, and let's address them separately. First, all tax rates are temporary. Income tax rates rise and fall according to which party has control of the government. Many changes to the tax rates come with expiration dates, as we are experiencing one right now in 2025 expiring.
Mm-hmm.
It all the time. When Bob does Congress.gov segments, you can see bills that want to make a particular provision in the tax code permanent. And by permanent, they mean until the next Congress comes along and changes it again. So if you want to oppose a tax system because the rates are subject to change, oppose the income tax outright. The income tax has a long established history of fluctuating tax rates.
Absolutely. And actually, if you're talking about fluctuating tax rates politically, it's just a much heavier lift. It's going to be harder to raise the fair tax rate than it is to monkey with the income tax rates. It's easy to raise income tax rates when you make your increase apply only to a relatively small number of taxpayers on the upper end of the scale. Stated another way, it's easy to raise taxes and get away with it when you're dealing with a group of people that doesn't have enough votes to impose any kind of political consequences for digging deeper into their pockets. But the fair tax affects everyone. If you raise the fair tax rate, everybody will see it. Everybody's going to feel the impact. And, politicians are not going to want to seek reelection from a constituency where 100% of them have had their taxes raised and they know it. Because we've seen politicians who advocate for higher taxes are usually really, really careful to frame this as higher taxes for the rich guys, but not for you. I remember one time, on the one time, there may be more than this, but one time I remember a politician ran on raising everybody's taxes. That was Walter Mondale in 1984. He was addressing the need to bring down the burgeoning budget deficit way back in 1984. And he told the audience, this is his quote, "Mr. Reagan will raise your taxes, and so will I. He won't tell you, I just did." Now, if I remember right, Mr. Mondale lost that election by a rather decisive margin. So
Without it.
If you're looking for stability in the tax rates, you should be supporting, not opposing the fair tax. That's crazy.
Yeah, nutty, just nutty. I tell you, that's it really is. The fair tax it's not a given that higher Social Security and Medicare costs will drive the fair tax rate up. In many cases, higher spending of any kind results in more borrowing and more debt, not higher tax rates. And there's a limit to how high you can boost tax rates without activating the law of diminishing returns.
Yeah.
The tax rate, the more you tax something, the less activity you find around that
Yeah,
particular.
so the fair tax rate will be forced up by rising Social Security and Medicare costs is probably not true. What will be forced up by rising Social Security and Medicare costs is more borrowing and more debt.
Well, and a lot of economists say, it's not the public, it's not our consuming activity that causes inflation, for example. It is what happens in Washington. It's government spending that creates inflation at a particular level, and even
Yeah,
as we've seen within the last 6 or 8 years.
yeah. Now it is a given that the fair tax expands the tax base for Social Security and Medicare from just those working for a paycheck to everyone whose spending rises above the poverty level. And also, we have heard this time and again from Professor David Kendall and other professional economists, taxing consumption instead of income results in a much more stable tax system. So if you chuck the income tax, replace it with a fair tax, Social Security and Medicare will be on a much firmer financial footing than with the fair tax versus the income tax. That's just crazy. Go ahead to point two this guy makes.
Two is the claim that the fair tax will make everything more expensive. We've heard that one over and over and over and over again, and it's simply just not true. Remember, the fair tax, remember, the fair tax replaces the income tax, and it's gone. A lot of people make this argument that you're going to have this and it's going to be on top of what you're getting with the income tax. But basically, the fair tax gets rid of the income tax altogether. It means it replaces the embedded costs of the income tax, the hidden taxes that you pay in every product or service that you buy or contract for today. And believe me, there's plenty. And that's probably one of the reasons why Washington doesn't want there to be a change, because all of a sudden we will begin to see exactly how much tax is levied upon us beyond what we see on paper at the withdrawal at the time that we get our paycheck. Under the fair tax, the cost of doing business goes way down. Not only is there no more corporate income tax to pass on to customers, compliance costs all but disappear, meaning your time that you spend and the actual financial costs of complying with the tax code. Compliance costs all the money that businesses had to spend over and above their tax liability just to comply with the tax code is what we're talking about. Things like the cost of hiring accountants, tax attorneys to do taxes for them, something businesses of all sizes have to do, some more than others. In a lot of cases, these compliance costs are greater than the tax liability, and it all gets passed on to the consumer. You hear people stand up in front of a microphone and they say, we need to tax the corporations. Well, friend, the taxes that corporations get levied upon them is going to be buried in the cost of the product or the service that you contract for or that you purchase.
Absolutely.
Uh,
This idea that the fair tax is going to make everything more expensive is just not true. There have actually been some studies done that have concluded retail prices are actually going to go down under the fair tax, when the fair tax replaces all of those embedded tax costs that are in the prices today that you don't see. Now, some other studies have said that retail prices might be moderately higher, nowhere near 23% higher, by the way. But even if prices do rise a bit, with the fair tax, people are going to have more money in their pockets. They will be bringing home their entire paychecks with no federal withholding, no payroll taxes. So even if that loaf of bread that whatever it is cost you $1 now ends up costing you $1.20, you're going to have more money in your pocket with the FAIRtax because you'll begin bringing home your entire paycheck.
Without a doubt. There's a page on fairtax.org that talks about the income tax, the number of filers versus the FAIRtax, the number of payers into the system. And it's a phenomenal difference between the numbers. It's like 155 million tax filers and 350 some odd million people that would be paying the FAIRtax at the cash register, including not only our own community, our people inside the citizens of the country, but also international travelers and the cash market, including drug dealers and the ladies of the night, et cetera. Anybody that's in the cash economy. So that's the big benefit right there. You suggest that the FAIRtax will result in an unbearable increase in the cost of living. You either don't understand the FAIRtax or you're being blatantly dishonest like this guy that wrote this article. And I'm sure he's just trying to cover his beep so that he's not running out of business. We've met a few people, had conversations with a few people that are like that, and they're just apprehensive. The apprehensive word is a good one to use, because I think people, if you don't understand it, then you're just not either not paying attention or you're not asking the right questions of people that know.
Yeah, well, one more quick point that this video never mentions the prebate at all. Now, the prebate untaxes all spending up to the poverty level. So if you got the low-income households out there, if they're spending at or near the poverty level, they will take little to nothing out of their own pocket to pay the FAIRtax. So some households actually will get more back in their prebate than they'll pay at the cash register. They'll have a negative tax rate. Middle-class taxpayers will pay around 11 to 13%. Only the super high spenders will pay anything close to the 23% out of pocket with the FAIRtax. So again, the argument that the FAIRtax is going to make everything we buy more expensive is just plain not so. And I say that those are the first two of the 10 points, and we will continue this next week as we are slap out of time here on FAIRtax Power Radio. Yes, excuse me. We'll be going through this entire 10 points that were hosted by this, WatchGuard Capital, I think was the name of it. Let me scroll back, sure I got that right. Yeah, WatchGuard Capital.
Give them credit.
We will continue with point number 3 next week here on FAIRtax Power Radio. But until we meet again, thank you so much for watching, sharing the videos. That helps us a great deal. We will see you back here next week, same time, same station for FAIRtax Power Radio. Till then, I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
We are the FAIRtax Guys, reminding you the FAIRtax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
So what would you do for her?
We've got several programs that will help her. We just need to find out how much she makes. But the good news is, the less she does, the more we can help.
Yeah.
If I may, with the FAIRtax, we wouldn't even tax her income. So the more she makes, the more she has.
But still, a consumption tax could eat up a lot of her income.
Which is why at the beginning of every month, we're actually going to give back all that she pays in taxes on basic necessities.
You're going to give her back her taxes?
Every month, on everything taxed on basic necessities. But we're also going to give it back to you and to every American citizen.
Why?
Well, we believe taxes should be fair.